Today we're reading chapter 12 of the Gospel of John in our Bible reading challenge for July. We have read halfway through the Gospel so far, but here in this chapter it marks the beginning of the last week of the life of Jesus, the Passion narrative. And although the first half of the Gospel spans perhaps years, recording and highlighting particular signs and miracles and sayings of Jesus, it all leads up, in fact, to this last week. And so the gospel seems almost out of balance, for the second half of the gospel is dedicated to only to the last week of the life of Jesus, going into the details, because this is actually the climax of the mission of Jesus, why he was sent into the world. And the chapter is divided into four parts, as it were. The first is of Mary, who we are introduced to in the previous chapter, whose brother Lazarus is raised from the dead, comes and pours perfume, very, very expensive perfume, out on the feet of Jesus, and she wipes it with her hair. Very moving scene. And one of his disciples is indignant of the seemingly waste of this. And we are introduced for the first time to Judas Iscariot, who becomes ultimately the betrayer of Jesus. And Jesus interprets this act as being prophetic, and he points to the fact that this prepares him for his burial. He then goes in and he enters Jerusalem on what we now celebrate as Palm Sunday, and the crowd shouts, "Hosanna, the King of Jerusalem is entering his own city." These are all fulfillments of prophetic words, of the purpose and the mission of the deliverer, of the Messiah. But of course, people have different opinions, different interpretations of Jesus, and this ultimately leads to the opposition and to the juxtaposition of what Jesus is going to face. And whilst he is talking to the crowd, he then repeats a particular motif, a particular theme, that of being in the light, because this becomes the contrast of those who would ultimately seek to betray Jesus, to sustain a system where it is offered their own interest of the darkness and of the praise they receive from humans and not from God, says this chapter. And I think it points particularly to this notion that the Jesus is trying to address and trying to bring righteousness into the world by judging the darkness, by saying that the prince of this world will now be judged. His works will come to the light and will be exposed and overcome by Jesus when he is lifted up. A reference to the snake lifted up in the desert by Moses, same as sort of reference to being the cross. It's a very crucial, a very emotive chapter, as we start to see how the narrative then starts to develop to the climax of Jesus' mission. And Jesus wants to not just overcome darkness in his context, but he addresses darkness on a metaphysical level, the systemic darkness that keeps people blind to the light. And the application, of course, is for us to not fall into unbelief, to truly seek out the light of Jesus and become like Mary, who pours out our hearts and adoration, the sacrifice of our being, pouring it all out, wiping it with our very hair. Perhaps in that moment of complete dedication and love for Jesus, because of the value, the extreme value that we place on him, for the value that he places on us. So in your time of prayer, what would an act of adoration mean for you, as we get to grips with where the scriptures is leading us, to the glorification of the Father for the act of Jesus, that he is laying his life down himself. This is an act of glory, and this glory will be showed to the entire world and for all eternity. So let me know what you think.